And welcome into the roundtable. And it is May 1st, and that is significant not only because it's May Day or because it's 3 days before May the 4th, if you're a Star Wars fan, but it's 3 months before the deadline the UPS has with the Teamsters to get a labor deal done. And we're going to talk about that in just a bit, but also talking about the state of UPS. And joining us is Mark Solomon, who joins us from Atlanta, our senior staff writer who has covered UPS extensively. And Mark, thanks so much for joining us. First, let's talk a little bit, I guess, about earnings, as UPS had their earnings call not too long ago. Down across the board, you put it up in your lead that this may be a tussle for Carol Tomé and UPS. What did you take from their earnings call?
Exactly that. It's going to be a difficult year macro-wise. The economy is not performing as well as UPS had expected. UPS had put aside several scenarios, a base case scenario where the markets would, fluctuate within a certain relatively narrow range, and then a scenario where the base case wasn't great. And unfortunately, that's what they hit. And the stock got whacked pretty hard. And basically, the company had to accept the fact that it is not immune from the difficulties that everyone is facing in both a weaker than expected domestic macro environment and continued weakness out of Asia.
Yeah. So as you looked at it, of course, you ran across a lot of the numbers, and regardless of the metric that you mentioned in the article, everything was down. Was there any surprising number to you in terms of things that fell farther than you would have expected or that UPS would have expected?
Nothing that comes to mind, Bill, to be perfectly honest. I believe that everything was, I'm sure domestic was a problem. The domestic fell faster and probably more sharply towards the end of the quarter, but nothing that, that would jump up and hit you in the face.
Gotcha. So with taking these numbers in at this point, I know you said a tussle. Is this a situation where they find themselves really between a rock and a hard place and in a very tough position where they're going to have to make some very hard decisions? Or do you think they can weather this in some degree and still keep everybody on board, if you will?
Are you referring to
either job cuts? Yeah, UPS itself.
There will be, I'm sure they're looking at workforce adjustments, attrition. I think UPS will be able to keep it together. I think there's a tremendous reservoir of fortitude there, and the numbers aren't great, and they're not going to be great for the rest of the year. So, yeah, again, I think the company needs to accept that fact. And as Carol has said many times, control what they can control.
Gotcha.
Put in,
as well.
Cost savings measures, efficiency measures, ensure that more packages move as quickly as possible through the system. And again, I think the company will get through this like they have virtually every other, I wouldn't call this a crisis, but they'll get through this like they've gotten through every other pebble in their shoe.
Gotcha. With that, so let's turn towards what may be coming on August the 1st. Obviously, you've got the labor negotiations with the Teamsters now 3 months away from that particular deadline. And right now, you and I talked a little bit, and it looks like they're doing out all of the delegate agreements, the smaller agreements, before they get to the big one right now. What are you hearing on that front in terms of how that labor agreement is going? Again, from a wide perspective.
Same issue. The Teamsters, as of, I believe, a couple of days ago, remained adamant that they would not begin discussion on the master contract, the main national contract, until all of the 40 supplemental deals are agreed to. I do not know, you hear the number that, oh, okay, there's 10 that have been agreed to, and UPS is, sort of dragging its feet on the other 30. UPS disagrees with that. They say we're bargaining in good faith. We can always negotiate regional and national agreements at the same time. And, it's at this point, it remains rhetoric. Nothing has changed at the table right now. And again, you still have time, Bill, and it's, there's some level of nervousness. There's some diversion of parcels that are occurring, albeit at a low level.
So with that, go ahead.
No, that's
okay. So with that, as you look at the situation, are there any sticking points in terms of the contracts themselves, whether they be wages, whether it be any kind of an issue that has maybe been a sticking point in the past that continues to be a thorn in the side, or is there a new issue that may perhaps be presenting itself?
Well, the issue that came up last year was the lack of air conditioning or proper ventilation in the vehicles. That will be addressed. To what extent it gets resolved to anybody's or to the Teamsters' satisfaction is another issue. There's the what are called 22.4 classifications. These are workers who kind of they're not seniority workers. They do the kind of work that senior workers do. They're considered second-class workers by the Teamsters. They don't get the same benefits, the same largesse that a senior worker does, though they put in the same amount of work. The Teamsters hate this language. They want it removed. And that may go. That we'll see what happens. There's pay, benefits, converting workers from part-time to full-time. That's something that is, always on the table. And UPS has done a very good job of converting a lot of workers. I forget the exact number. It's in the thousands, how many workers, union full-time jobs were created by UPS since the last contract 5 years ago. But it's a significant amount. I forget the exact number.
That's definitely something to consider moving forward. I wanted to ask this one more question on Sean O'Brien in terms of what he's been doing. Obviously, the only, at least as far as this negotiating term is set, it looks like the only kind of screwball he's thrown is saying we're going to do the master contract after all of these other contracts are done. But how do you look at his performance so far and how he's handling the situation, his first at the head of the Teamsters?
As expected. He's rough. He's tough. He comes with a reputation. It's well earned. It's not Hollywood. This is a tough guy who did his cutting and slashing, on the job. He wasn't a lawyer, or excuse me, I should take that back. He wasn't a full-time corporate lawyer. He wasn't a lawyer. I mean, he's just saying he wasn't a Jimmy Hoffa who never worked on the docks. He's a tough hombre, and he's given UPS a lot of heartburn while he was running Local 25 in Boston. And he comes with a very strong, well-earned reputation. And again, we've talked about this multiple times. I do not think there'll be a strike. I think Carol Tomei, the CEO, is right when she says that there's more right now that the two sides agree on and then they disagree on, and that a deal will be reached. And, the stuff that's disagreeable, if you want to call it that, can be worked out.
Gotcha. So we're honestly right now we're assuming 3 months out that all of these positioning that these other parcel carriers have made, FedEx a couple of weeks ago, saying we're ready for it when it happens. Basically, just positioning to try and pick up something that may definitely not be there.
Also, keep in mind, Bill, one last thing:
Sure.
the management at UPS have been told not to take any PTO for July and August. And the reason is that they need to be available to move freight. This isn't going to be like 1997 where the UPS system virtually shut down. Obviously there'll be severe disruptions, but it's not going to be the same, just, okay, Teamsters are striking, we can't honor our commitments to our customers. We're just going to close our network. It's not going to be like that.
Gotcha.
And it may not be like that anyway, because I don't think we're ever going to get to that point.
Yeah. So, but it's still going to be all hands on deck anyway for at least that foreseeable future. All right. Mark Solomon, thanks so much for joining us. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on this over the course of the next 3 months.
Okay. Have a good day, Bill.